My name is Kendra Hensley. I'm 32 years old, and last week I stood in a concrete storage unit staring at my daughter's names painted on the wall with a detective beside me. The air smelled like fresh paint and baby powder. There was a crib built for two, a rocking chair, a dresser full of newborn clothes with the tags still on, and a little lamp shaped like a sheep. Somebody had painted clouds across the back wall, and under those clouds, in careful looping letters, were two names, my girls' names. Names I had never announced to anyone. On a folding table by the door sat a stack of my stolen mail, held together with a rubber band. The detective asked if I recognized the handwriting on the wall. I did. That was the moment my knees finally gave. But here's what none of them knew. The woman who built this room had been rehearsing to replace me for 9 months. And how does a nursery end up in a rented unit on Route 9? The answer starts at a baby shower in February, the day my sister picked up a cake knife. Welcome back to Calm Drama, stories where quiet people finally tell the stories their families hoped would stay buried. If you've ever been told to keep the peace while someone else kept the spotlight, this one is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Before any of this, I was just a pediatric nurse in Springfield, Missouri, working 3 12-hour shifts a week at Mercy General. 8 years on the floor. I liked the night shift, the quiet hum of the monitors, the way a scared kid settles when you sit down instead of standing over them. Nurses learn one habit early and it saves lives. We chart everything. Time, dose, response, initials. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Remember that. It matters later. My husband Travis runs a 3-man heating and cooling company. He's the kind of man who checks your furnace filter while he's over for dinner and won't take a dime for it. We met when he fixed the air conditioning on the pediatric wing in July. He asked me out in the parking garage, sweating through his shirt, holding his clipboard like a shield. We bought a little brick house on Maplewood Drive 4 years ago, nothing fancy. We painted every room ourselves, and Travis built the porch swing from a kit that came with the wrong screws, which he still brings up. I tell you all this so you understand what I had and what my sister decided I had stolen from her. I earn my life one shift at a time. Scholarship, student loans, double shifts, a second-hand car with a taped mirror until I was 28. Nobody handed me anything. That detail is going to matter too, because for 32 years, my family told a different story about me. That things came easy for Kendra. That Kendra was the strong one. That Kendra didn't need help. It sounds like a compliment. Hold it up to the light and it's a job assignment. And in my family, there was only ever one patient and it was never me. Her name was Melissa. She was 3 years older. And by the time I was 10, I already knew the rules of the house. The rules were simple. Whatever day it was Melissa's day. My 10th birthday party got canceled an hour before the guests arrived, because Melissa doubled over with a stomach ache that had her screaming on the kitchen floor. Mom drove her to urgent care while my dad quietly called the other parents. The doctors found nothing. By 7 that evening, Melissa was sitting cross-legged in front of the TV eating my birthday cake, pain-free, and Mom smoothed my hair and said, "She needs us more than you do, Kenny." I used to think that sentence was love. It took me 20 years to hear what it really was. It happened at my choir concert, my graduation, my wedding rehearsal. A fainting spell, a migraine, a crisis timed like a train schedule. Melissa was never scolded and never wrong. She was sensitive. She was fragile. She was going through something. My mother, Lorraine, ran our family like a stage manager with 1 star, and the star could not stand anyone else near the lights. One more thing about Melissa, and I need you to keep it in your pocket for later. She hated being touched. Always had. No hugs, no linked arms, no hand on the shoulder. Family joke was, you greeted Melissa like a cat, you let her come to you. Even at her own wedding, she and Blake did a stiff little sway at arm's length while everybody clapped. So, no, nobody at that baby shower thought twice about the fact that not one guest had patted her belly in months. You didn't touch Melissa. You admired her from a respectful distance, like a museum piece, which is exactly how my mother raised her. I'm not telling you this so you'll hate a little girl with a stomach ache. I'm telling you because 30 years of that raises a question nobody in my family ever dared to ask. What happens to the star when somebody else has news? We found out 6 years ago when my dad's heart quit in the driveway with a garden hose still running in his hand. He was 58. Roy Whitmore was a quiet man who fixed things and asked for nothing. And I have spent a lot of my life trying to be him. At the funeral, Melissa wailed so hard that 2 ushers helped her out of the pew, and the whole church watched her go, and my mother went with her. And that was the last anyone saw of either of them at my father's service. I stayed. I shook every hand in the receiving line by myself. I was 26. Afterward, Melissa disappeared for 3 months. Grieving in her own way, Mom said, while I canceled Dad's subscriptions, filed the life insurance, sold his truck, and sat with my mother every Sunday while she cried into the good tablecloth. One of those Sundays, Mom took my hand across the table and said, "You're the strong one, Kendra. I don't know what I'd do without you." I carried that sentence around like a medal for years before I understood it was a harness. The strong one doesn't get asked how she's doing. The strong one gets handed the paperwork. The strong one waits, and I want to be honest with you because this part is on me. I liked being needed. After Dad died, holding my mother together became my second job, and I clocked in every week without fail. That's my flaw. It was never that I trusted too easily. I never trusted Melissa an inch. It was that I believed my mother was mine to manage, mine to protect, mine to keep from breaking. It never once occurred to me to ask what my mother was doing with all that access to me. It should have, because one August evening at that same table under that same tablecloth, I handed her the one secret I couldn't afford to lose. Travis and I started trying for a baby the spring I turned 30. Nothing happened. A year of nothing, then tests, then words like unexplained and diminished, which are doctor words for we don't know and we're sorry. We did 2 rounds of IUI at $4,800 we pulled out of the porch remodel fund. Both failed. I'm a nurse. I know the numbers. Knowing the numbers does not help you in the shower at 2 in the morning, and it does not help you in the greeting card aisle in May. We kept it private, completely private for 2 years except once. One evening in August at my mother's kitchen table. She caught me crying over a diaper commercial and I broke. I told her about the tests, the 2 failed rounds, the money, all of it. She held my hand and swore it would stay between us. I told exactly one person in this world. Hold on to that detail. Travis never even told his own brother. We weren't ashamed. We were protecting something soft the way you'd shield a match from wind. And I'll say this plainly because women like us don't say it enough. Infertility is not a personality flaw, and it is not a competition entry. It's a grief that lives in your calendar. Every month has a due date in it that never existed. You learn to smile at other people's announcements with your back teeth pressed together, and you get good at it, and you hate that you're good at it. By that August, I had gotten very good at it. So when September came and my phone lit up with a group text from my mother, all caps, a row of pink and blue hearts, "Family dinner Sunday, Melissa has news." I put the phone face down on the counter, finished drying the dishes, and practiced my smile in the dark kitchen window. I already knew what the news was. It was always going to be her news first. Melissa announced her pregnancy that Sunday in September, the way other people launch a product. She stood at the head of my mother's table, tapped a glass, and unveiled a framed sonogram like it was a lottery check. 12 weeks along, due at the end of March. And here's the truth, the whole truth. I was happy for her. Genuinely. Whatever 30 years of birthdays had done to us, a baby is a baby, and I watched my sister glow and thought, maybe this softens her. Maybe this fixes something. My mother cried and started a group chat that same night called Baby Watch. And for the next 2 months, Baby Watch was the only channel our family broadcast on. Melissa quit her job at the furniture store to focus on the pregnancy. Mom drove her to appointments or said she did. Every craving got a photo. Every twinge got a paragraph. I hit the little thumbs up on all of it from the break room at midnight, and I never once complained. And I want that on the record. The only person who didn't glow was Blake. My brother-in-law is a big, gentle guy who sells insurance and laughs at his own jokes before the punchline. And that fall, his laugh went missing. He'd sit at family dinner with dark circles under his eyes, cutting his food into smaller and smaller pieces, smiling half a second too late. When I asked him in October if he was sleeping, he said, "Work was crazy." Insurance is never crazy in October. I noticed it the way you notice a car parked wrong on your street. You clock it, you move on. I had my own life running underneath all this, and by late fall, mine had quietly caught fire in the best way. But keep your eye on Blake. Out of everyone at that table passing the rolls and toasting the future, he was the only one who wasn't acting. In late October, Baby Watch went quiet. Not silent, curated. The daily photos stopped, and in their place came short updates typed by my mother. Melissa is resting. Doctor wants her taking it easy. Please respect her privacy. She's limiting visitors. Melissa skipped Thanksgiving entirely. Mom delivered a plate to the duplex and reported back that she was doing beautifully, just tired. Something else changed that nobody named out loud. My sister, who had never been a hugger, stopped letting anyone within arms reach at all. She came to one family lunch in early December, wrapped in a big cardigan, sat at the far end, and left before pie. I didn't connect it then. Why would I? I had a policy of not looking too closely at Melissa, the way you don't stare into the sun. And besides, that same week, my own world tilted. I came off a night shift on a gray Tuesday in mid-December, and out of stubborn habit took a pregnancy test from the box under the sink. The value pack of disappointment, Travis called it, because gallows humor is free. I set it on the edge of the tub and started brushing my teeth. Then I stopped brushing my teeth. 2 lines. After 2 years, 2 clean, undeniable pink lines. I walked into the kitchen holding the stick like it was a baby bird, and Travis took one look and sat straight down on the floor next to the dishwasher. And we stayed down there on the cold tile, laughing and crying until his coffee went cold above us. We decided, before we even stood up, we would tell no one until the first trimester was safely behind us. 2 years of heartbreak buys you that caution. We had lost pregnancies that never got past a test stick, and we would not hand this one to the world before it could hold its own weight. No one meant no one. For a while, we even managed it. The ultrasound in mid-January is the best memory I own. The tech went quiet, tilted her head, and turned the screen toward us. 2 flickers, 2 heartbeats, twins. Travis made a sound I have never heard from a grown man before or since. Something between a hiccup and a hallelujah. Girls, we'd learn later. 2 girls. I floated through my shifts for a week, and then I made the phone call I would give anything to take back, understand my thinking, or at least my wiring. My mother was 61, widowed, and I had spent 6 years as her load-bearing wall. Melissa's shower was 5 weeks out, and I knew, the way you know your own family's weather, that if Mom found out later that I'd hidden this from her for months, the fallout would land on me for a decade. So I called her on a Thursday night in late January. I told her about the twins. I told her the names we'd fallen in love with, Harper and Hazel, because she asked, and because saying them out loud to my mother felt like introducing her to her granddaughters. And then I said clearly twice, "Mom, this stays with you. Not a word to anyone until after Melissa's shower. Her day comes first. I mean it." She went quiet for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is nothing. 3 seconds is also a very long time when you know someone's rhythms. And my mother's congratulations when they came arrived a half beat late, like Blake's smile. "Of course, sweetheart," she said. "Of course, that's Melissa's day." I hung up, feeling lighter. I had done the responsible thing, the considerate thing, the strong one thing. I had managed everyone's feelings and protected everyone's day. Somewhere across town, I now know, my mother sat with that phone in her lap in a dark kitchen, holding my secret in one hand and a much heavier one in the other. The shower was the second Saturday of February at my mother's house. 30 guests, pink and gold balloons, a 2-tier cake from the Good Bakery with a ribbon on the knife, and a banner over the fireplace that said, "Welcome, baby." Melissa held court in a white armchair like a queen at 34 weeks, opening gifts in that big cream sweater she'd been living in, and I sat off to the side, keeping my own 14-week secret tucked under a loose blouse. With twins, you show early, and I was already careful how I stood. I fetched punch. I wrote down who gave what because of course that job was mine. It was by any measure entirely her day, and I was fine with that. Then came the toast. My mother stood, raised her glass, got through 2 lovely sentences about miracles and new chapters, and then her eyes swept past Melissa and landed on me. And I watched it happen in slow motion, the words leaving her before anything could stop them. "And soon this family will have even more blessings because Kendra's carrying twins." The room did that thing where every conversation dies at once. 30 faces swung toward me. Somebody's aunt actually clapped twice before she read the temperature. And Melissa rose from the white armchair without a word, walked to the cake table and picked up the knife. She turned around holding it, and she pointed it at my stomach, at my hands which had flown there on instinct. And she screamed, "This is my day." The scream didn't scare me half as much as what came after it. I put my palms out and said, "Mel, put it down. Please calm down." And my sister leaned in and her voice dropped to almost nothing, and she said, "You stole my life and my babies." Babies. I remember the word snagging somewhere in the back of my mind. Even then, my Aunt Carol got an arm around Melissa's shoulders and steered her backward, and the knife clattered onto the cake, ruining the bottom tier. And my mother stood frozen with her glass still raised while her church friends stared into their punch cups. I did not scream back. I kept my face still. I collected my coat and my husband, and I walked out of my mother's house through a silence you could have cut with that same knife. In the truck, Travis sat with his hands on the wheel, not starting the engine. "Kendra," he said slowly, "did you hear what she said? Babies plural. We haven't told a single soul there were 2. Neither of us said anything the whole way home. There was nothing safe to say. Let me pause here because I can feel some of you not believing me. A knife at a baby shower sounds unbelievable. I stood there and I barely believed it. But the knife was never the scary part. The scary part was finding out how long she had been sharpening it. If you've ever underestimated a jealous relative, tell me in the comments. And stay with me because the storage unit is worse than you think. Subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. Now, you might expect that pointing a blade at your pregnant sister in front of 30 witnesses would earn a person some consequences. You do not know my family. My phone rang at 7 the next morning, and it was my mother. And I made the mistake of hoping. I thought she was calling to ask if I was okay. She was not. Your sister is in a fragile place right now, Mom said in the same calm, managerial voice she'd used my whole life. That announcement was poorly timed, Kendra. You have to see that. I reminded her that the announcement had been hers, a pause. Well, it was going to come out eventually. The point is, Melissa feels blindsided, and I need you to not make this bigger than it is. Bigger than it is. A knife pointed at my abdomen at her party. And my assignment, mine, was containment. I stood at my kitchen counter, listening to my mother negotiate on behalf of the person who'd threatened her unborn grandchildren, and something in me went very still and very clear, like the moment a fever breaks. Mom, I said. She pointed a knife at my stomach. And my mother said, I will remember this until I die. It was a cake knife, Kendra. It was her day. There it was, the house rule spoken plainly at last over a phone line to the strong one. I said I had to get ready for work. I didn't have work. I sat down at the kitchen table where Travis had left his coffee, and I did the thing 8 years of nursing had drilled into my hands when everything is going wrong at once. I took out a notebook, wrote the date at the top of the page, and started charting. February 9th, party, knife, exact words, witnesses. February 10th, 7:02 a.m., phone call, exact words. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Fine. From now on, everything was going to be written down. Aunt Carol called that Wednesday. Carol is my mother's younger sister, a retired school bus driver with a lie detector where most people keep their manners. And she'd been the one to walk Melissa off me at the shower. She got 2 sentences of small talk in and gave up. Kendra, honey, I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down for it. That mess Saturday wasn't out of nowhere. According to Carol, since late January, weeks before the shower, Melissa had been working the family phone tree, calling cousins, calling my mother's church friends, telling anyone who'd listen that I had been faking fertility problems for sympathy. And that the moment her pregnancy got the family's attention, I'd suddenly, conveniently, turned up pregnant myself with twins, no less, because Kendra always has to win. And she told me you'd been jealous of her your whole life. Carol said she had it all organized, like a little speech. Honey, she was telling people about your twins before your mother ever raised that glass. I thanked Carol. I wrote it all down. Then I sat in my quiet kitchen and let the 2 impossible pieces knock against each other. My fertility struggles told to one person once in August. My twins told to one person once in late January. Melissa had both, and she'd had them early enough to build a smear campaign out of them before the shower. The knife hadn't been a snap. It had been an opening night, which left a question I could barely stand to hold. There were only 2 people in that kitchen in August, and one of them was me. I looked at that sentence in my notebook for a long time. Then I wrote under it in small letters the most generous theory available. Mom let it slip. Moms let things slip. I underlined it twice like underlining could make it true. The Facebook post went up 11 days after the shower. A photo of Melissa, mascara artfully wrecked, one hand resting on the cream sweater, and 3 paragraphs I could recite for you today. And she wrote that her baby shower had been hijacked and destroyed by a family member who could not stand to let her have one single day. She wrote that she had been verbally attacked while heavily pregnant and had to be protected by relatives. She never used my name. She didn't have to. 200 comments bloomed under it like mold, prayer hands, broken hearts. Some people need attention like oxygen. Stay strong, Mama. My cousin Dana, who I taught to drive, commented a frowning face. By that weekend, 2 of my great aunts had unfriended me, and a woman from my mother's church stopped me in the grocery store, looked at my rounding belly, and just shook her head slowly like I was a car crash she was driving past. I want to tell you the truth about what that does to a person because the truth is embarrassing. At midnight, pregnant and furious, I sat on my couch and typed a reply. 4 paragraphs, the dates, the witnesses, the knife. My thumb was over the post button when my phone buzzed. The charge nurse asking me to cover Sunday, and I looked at my own words glowing in the dark living room. And I heard myself think clear as a bell, if you post this, you're a contestant. The only prize in her game is attention, and the only way to win is to stop playing on her stage. I deleted the reply. I opened a folder on my laptop instead, labeled it with the date, and screenshotted everything. Her post, every comment, the unfriendings, all of it. Evidence doesn't shout. Evidence doesn't need likes. Melissa was building an audience. Fine, I would build a record. March arrived, and with it, a strange season of small, deniable cruelties. A flower delivery to my door. White lilies, the funeral kind, with a card that said in loving memory and no name. A cash-on-delivery order of newborn diapers I never placed. The first of 6 deliveries, each one requiring me to stand on my porch and explain to a confused driver that no, I hadn't ordered anything. Then the calls started at the hospital. The unit secretary flagged me down one night. A woman had phoned twice asking which shifts Nurse Hensley worked, claiming to be a family friend planning a surprise. We don't give that out, obviously. She'd hung up both times. I logged every incident in the notebook, date, time, what, who witnessed. And somewhere in week 3, reading it back on my break, the pattern stood up and looked at me. The lilies arrived the day of my 16-week appointment. The first diaper stunt landed on the day of my blood work. The hospital calls came the same afternoon my OB's office called to reschedule my 20-week scan. Every strike landed on a day that meant something in my pregnancy. Days that existed nowhere except my own calendar and my own medical file. I sat in the break room with my notebook on my knees and a cold cup of coffee, and I wrote one sentence and boxed it in ink. It's like she has my calendar. Travis wanted to drive to the duplex and have it out. I talked him down, and I'll tell you exactly why. Confrontation was the invitation she was engraving. Every stunt was a doorbell she was ringing, waiting for me to answer angry in public on camera, so the story she'd built could come true. I would not answer, but I did start asking a colder question in the margins of my notes. Not why is she doing this? How does she know? I got my answer to neither question on the last Friday of March in the waiting room of Riverbend Women's Health at my rescheduled 20-week scan. I checked in, sat down, reached for a magazine, and there she was. Melissa, sitting across the waiting room in the cream sweater, hands folded on the swell of her belly, watching me with a small, patient smile like she'd been holding my seat. My appointment time existed in 3 places on Earth. My phone, Travis's phone, and my chart. Small world, she said loud enough for the room. I did not perform. Every pregnant woman in that waiting room was watching, and some animal instinct told me that an audience was the whole point. That somewhere in her story tonight, I would be the unstable one who made a scene at a clinic. So, I walked to the front desk instead and quietly asked 3 questions. Nurse to receptionist. Has anyone called about my appointments? Can you add a privacy flag to my chart? Can you check whether anyone but me has accessed my portal account? The receptionist typed, frowned, typed again. No calls logged. Flags on now. And no one but you has ever logged into your portal. That night, I changed every password I owned anyway, turned on every alert, and wrote the whole scene down while Travis read over my shoulder with his jaw working. Here is what I need you to understand. I did not shrug this off. I saw the red flag. I acted on the red flag that same day in every way a careful person could. The system itself looked me in the eye and told me I was secure. When they finally found the leak months later, it turned out to be somewhere no password change could reach. A door I'd left open 6 years earlier and had every reason to believe was closed. We'll get there. Melissa never had an appointment that day. The desk confirmed it. She'd just known where I'd be. The first week of April, Melissa asked to meet. Neutral ground, a coffee shop on Commercial Street, just us girls to clear the air. I went against Travis's advice for one reason. My notebook had a blank column labeled her side, and I am the kind of person who fills in columns. For 10 minutes, I saw a performance worth the price of admission. Tears at the right moments, a trembling hand on the belly. The hormones have me all turned around. Kenny, you know I'd never actually hurt you. She dabbed her eyes with a napkin, and I watched her check over the rim of the napkin whether the couple at the next table was watching. Then came the pivot, smooth as a key change. But you have to understand how it looked, announcing twins at my shower. You've been second your whole life, and I get that this was your moment, but it was supposed to be my day. My day. Always the same words, smooth as river stones, and then the ask, the real reason for the coffee and the tears. So I think for the family, you should post something on Facebook, just clearing up that it was a misunderstanding and you're sorry for how it unfolded. Mom agrees. It would mean so much to her. There it was. A public confession drafted by the offender, co-signed by my mother, to be published under my name. I looked at my sister for a long moment and I said, "No, Mel, I'm not going to do that." And I watched the tears shut off. Not fade, shut off like a faucet mid-drop. What was left looking back at me was flat and cold and older than both of us. I stood, put money on the table for both drinks and walked out. It was the tap I kept thinking about on the drive home. You can't fake plumbing like that. The crying was the mask. The dry eyes were my sister. Melissa's due date was the end of March. It came and went with no news. And I'll admit, the quiet felt strange. But April, in a hospital, eats your attention, and I let it. Then the second week of April, my mother summoned the family to a healing dinner. And before anyone lifted a fork, she stood, gripped the back of her chair, and announced through tears that Melissa had lost the baby. Stillborn, she said, 36 weeks. It had happened privately with dignity, and Melissa needed love now, not questions. The table made the sound a family makes when the floor gives out. My great-aunt wept into her napkin. Dana ran to the bathroom, and I sat there with my hands over the twins and grieved for my sister. Honestly, physically grieved, because whatever she had pointed at me in February, I would not have wished this on her in 1,000 years. I reached for my phone to text Blake my heart, my help, anything. And that's when the details started refusing to line up. No hospital was ever named, and I know every delivery ward in 3 counties. No funeral, no marker, no date. Melissa doesn't want a service. It would break her. Blake never answered my message or anyone's. I learned later he had gone to his brother's to grieve like men do. A sentence that should be in a museum of things that mean the opposite of what they say. And no questions meant no questions. When Dana gently asked what the baby's name had been, my mother just looked at her. Just looked. and Dana apologized. I drove home that night with my grief slowly curdling into something I couldn't name and didn't want to. In my notebook, I wrote the facts, then sat with the pen hovering, then added, "No hospital, no name, no Blake." I closed the notebook. Some doors you're not ready to open, even when your own hand wrote the address. Grief rearranged the family board, and every piece moved toward me. Overnight, the shower was forgotten, the knife was forgotten, and a new story settled over us like snow. Melissa had lost everything. Kendra had everything, and decent people balanced their accounts. My mother said it right out loud at Sunday dinner in May, spooning green beans onto my plate like a down payment. "Your babies are all she has left now, Kendra. Let her be part of this pregnancy. It would heal her." Within a week, the requests arrived, each one relayed through Mom, each one bigger than the last. Melissa wants to come to the anatomy scan. Melissa should be in the delivery room. She's a mother now, too, in her heart. Melissa would love to be godmother, and then on a Tuesday phone call, the one that made my ears ring. "Melissa has some beautiful thoughts on names. You have room for compromise there, honey. You're having two. Room for compromise on my daughter's names." Travis, who had spent 3 months being talked down by me, finally boiled over at that dinner table, stood up, said the first hard sentence he'd ever said to my mother. Something plain and true about knives and apologies nobody had made, and walked out to the truck. Me, I did it quieter because quiet is my native language. I looked at my mother and I said, "No, Mom, to all of it, no." One little word and you'd have thought I fired a gun in church. She actually stepped back from the table. I had never said it to her before, not once in 32 years. It felt like the first word of a language I should have learned as a girl. 2 days later, my mother mentioned breezily mid-call that she'd heard my 26-week appointment had gone beautifully. I hadn't told her about that appointment. I hadn't told anyone. In early June, my mother asked me to sort Dad's old things for the church donation drive, a chore she'd been assigning me for 6 years, and one I'd never once minded, because an hour alone with my father's flannel shirts is its own kind of chapel. The boxes lived in the guest room closet, Dad's things on the bottom shelf, Mom's keepsakes above. Photo albums, ribbons, and the old tin where she'd saved every card anyone ever mailed her. I wasn't snooping. The tin was wedged against the box I needed, and when I pulled, the lid popped, and a lifetime of birthday cards fanned out across the carpet. I knelt there, gathering them up, half smiling at the ancient ones, and stopped. Between a get well card and a church bulletin lay a folded piece of printer paper, and through the fold I could see the gray cone of an ultrasound image. I opened it. It was mine, my 20-week anatomy scan, the one from the last Friday of March. Riverbend's header across, the top, my patient ID in the corner, both babies mid-wiggle. A printout of a screen I had only ever seen inside my own portal account. And down the margin, next to each little gray profile, someone had written my daughter's names. Harper Hazel, in handwriting I had known since childhood, looping and pretty, and unmistakably my sister's. Each name underlined twice. My daughter's names were underlined twice in my sister's handwriting on a printout I had never given anyone. I don't know how long I knelt there on the guest room carpet. Long enough to hear my mother humming to the radio in her kitchen. 1 floor of carpet and drywall away, close enough to call out to. I had told those names to one person on this earth. The room was very quiet, and the 2 facts stood in it with me, holding hands. The leak came through my mother's house, and whatever was flowing through that pipe was ending up annotated, underlined, and filed in my sister's hand. I did not walk into the kitchen. I folded the printout into my purse with hands that had gone full nurse, steady because they had to be. Finished boxing my father's shirts, kissed my mother's cheek at the door, and drove home with the radio off. All 15 minutes listening to my own pulse. Here's where I stopped being a daughter with hurt feelings and started being a professional with a problem. Monday morning, I took my notebook, my screenshot folder, and the folded sonogram to a family law attorney named June Albright. Gray bob, reading glasses on a chain, a handshake like a nutcracker. $2,500 retainer, a worth every cent for what she said in the first 10 minutes. Stop trying to figure out why. Crazy is not your case. Pattern is your case. Document everything. Say nothing to anyone and let her keep talking. Then she tapped the sonogram. And this, we don't confront this yet. If your mother is the channel is now an asset. A channel can be tested. So we tested it. That Sunday at dinner, calm as you please, I served my mother a lie with the pot roast. I told her, just her, door closed, voice low, girl to girl, that my doctors had made a decision. With twins, they wanted me delivering at St. Vincent's across town, not Mercy General where I work. Every word false. My delivery was planned for Mercy, had always been planned for Mercy, and exactly 3 living souls knew that. Me, Travis, and June Albright's legal pad. My mother received the false secret with a squeeze of my hand and a promise, God love her, that it would stay between us. A canary in a coal mine doesn't have to do anything, June explained. It just has to sing where only one tunnel can hear it. If St. Vincent ever came back to me in a comment, a call, a stunt, I'd have my proof of the whole pipeline. Mother to sister, no password required. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt since February, and it took me miles to name it. It wasn't safety. It was initiative. For 4 months, the game had been played on me. Starting Sunday, I was dealing. 2 weeks later, in the middle of June, my neighbor Ruth from across the street flagged me down at my mailbox. Ruth is 74, sleeps like a cat, and misses nothing on Maplewood Drive. Sweetheart, she said, does your sister visit at night? I felt my face do something. Careful, Ruth described it. Around 2 in the morning, twice that week, a car parked down past the Hendersons, and a woman walked back up the sidewalk to stand at the side of our house. The north side, where the spare bedroom is, the room with the crib boxes visible through the window, and just standing there. The second night, Ruth swore, the woman raised a phone and took pictures of the window, of the dark window of my daughter's someday room. The next morning, I found soft dents in the flower bed under that window, the tidy oval prints of a woman's flat shoes, and photographed them next to a tape measure like I was working a scene. Because by then, I suppose I was. I didn't call my mother. I didn't post about it. I called a company off a work friend's recommendation. And by Friday, we had a doorbell camera, 2 motion flood lights, and a camera over the garage covering the north side. Travis walked the yard every night before bed that whole summer, coffee in hand, casual as a man checking tomatoes, about as casual as a lighthouse. And still, the mail started going missing. Little things at first, things you'd blame on the postal service. A bank statement that never came. A birthday card from Carol with $20 she swore she'd sent. Then the clinic's appointment reminder cards, 2 months running. I filed a Holden pickup at the post office and noted every gap in the notebook, which had become 2 notebooks. You can call all this paranoid. In July, you'd have been right to wonder. By November, a detective would be photographing that same rubber-banded mail on a folding table on Route 9. The text came on a Thursday night in late June from a number I hadn't seen light up my phone since April. Blake, can we talk? Not on the phone. Please don't tell Mel or your mom, please. I stared at it for a long time. Travis read it over my shoulder and said, "Trap," which tells you where our family was by June. But I kept thinking about the man with the missing laugh, cutting his food smaller and smaller all fall. The only person at that table who wasn't acting. Some people go quiet because they're guilty. Some go quiet because they're carrying something. I texted back, "A diner out on Route 6, Saturday, 10 a.m. He was there when I arrived early, which Blake never is. Folded into the last booth with his back to the wall. 2 coffees already going cold and a manila folder squared up on the table in front of him like a man about to confess to a crime that wasn't his. He looked thinner. He looked like the office headshot of himself left out in the rain. When I slid into the booth, he tried to say hello and managed about half of it. Then he put his hand flat on the folder and he said, "Kendra, before I open this, I need you to know I wanted to tell you in April. I wanted to tell everyone. I was outvoted." Outvoted. In a family, think about what that word means and who gets votes. I looked at the folder under his big freckled hand, and I understood with total clarity that whatever was inside was going to break the story of my family in half. That there would forever be before this booth and after this booth. I reached for it anyway. Before I tell you what was in that folder, if this story is hitting close to home, do one thing for me tonight. Check who still has access to your life. Your accounts, your portals, your spare keys, the proxy permissions you set up years ago and forgot. I thought a changed password made me safe. I was wrong, and it cost me a summer. Comment checked when you've done it and subscribe if you haven't, because what's in Blake's folder changes every single thing you've heard so far, and we are just getting to the part my family still won't say out loud. Inside the folder was a hospital discharge summary dated the 20th of October. Cox South Emergency Department, 1 town over. Patient, Melissa Carr. And on the second line, in the flat language medicine uses when it can't afford feelings, the words that rewrote my entire year. Fetal demise, 17 weeks. October, 17 weeks. I did the math the way you check a med dose twice, hoping to be wrong. The baby my family toasted in February had been gone since the 20th of October. The belly under that cream sweater was padding. The shower, the balloons, the 2-tier cake, the ribbon on the knife had been a party for a child who no longer existed, thrown by the one other woman in that room who knew, because she knew. Blake's voice came out sanded flat. It was Lorraine who met them at the ER that night. Lorraine who sat in the hallway while Melissa was told. And in the parking lot at 2 in the morning, it was Lorraine who took her shattered daughter's face in her hands and made the plan. "We don't tell people yet. You'll announce when you're ready. Let Mom handle the family." Then the shower invitations went out. In January, Blake said, "And I thought she'll cancel it. She has to cancel it." And your mom kept saying, "Let her have this. It's part of her healing." He'd beg them both to get Melissa to a doctor of the other kind. Lorraine's answer never changed. Therapy is for strangers. Family heals family. And there was more. The reason he couldn't sit inside it anymore. It hadn't been the first. 4 other pregnancies over 6 years, all ended early, all hidden. A private ladder of grief my sister had been climbing alone, while the family admired her from the required distance. Everyone at that shower was toasting a baby who had been gone since October, and the only 2 women who knew were holding the cake. I thought about the knife pointed at my stomach and the sentence under it. "You stole my life and my babies." And it changed in my hands like a photograph developing. She hadn't been announcing hate. She'd been announcing a delusion. One my mother had catered, decorated, and mailed invitations for. Blake's phone buzzed on the table between us, Mel flashing on the screen. He went gray and turned it face down, and neither of us breathed for a second. I want to be careful here because this is the part where some of you will say, she was sick. Kendra, have mercy. And I did. I sat in my car outside that diner and cried for my sister. For 17 weeks, for 5 hidden losses, for the girl raised as an exhibit who was never taught to be a person. Mercy was never the question. The question was what mercy is allowed to cost and who my family had decided would pay it. Because pity does not make a person safe too. Be near. Sometimes it makes them less safe. And everyone who loved her had voted to leave her untreated and aim her at me. I got my answer about cost that same weekend. Sunday night, 1:40 in the morning. The floodlight tripped. The doorbell camera caught it clean. A figure at our back gate working the latch. The gate code to which 4 people on Earth knew because my mother kept our spare key and codes on a cup hook in her pantry labeled. Because of course she did. The latch scraped, the light hit, and the figure walked away fast down the fence line, unhurried and wrong, hugging a canvas bag, chin tucked. You couldn't see the face. I didn't need the face. Monday morning, June Albright watched that clip twice without blinking, then opened her calendar. We're done collecting. Now we file. An ex parte order of protection granted by a Greene County judge that Thursday on the strength of 2 notebooks, 1 folder of screenshots, 1 flower card, 1 footprint photo, and 11 seconds of video. Temporary, June warned me. The real test was the final hearing. Both sides present, evidence on the record set for September. Then bumped again by the court's calendar to November 14th. The system is slow. She was not. From that Thursday on, my life became a countdown with a date at the bottom of it, and so did this story. November 14th. Hold on to it. The sheriff served Melissa on a Friday. My phone detonated by dinner time. My mother's opening line. No, hello. A restraining order against your sister? Have you lost your mind? I sat at my kitchen table 8 months pregnant and let her go. The fragility, the grief, the family handles family, the entire hymnal, and while she preached, I did something new. I said almost nothing back, not out of fear. Strategy, June's voice in my head. Let them talk. Everything they say is inventory. And my mother monologuing to a silent daughter was inventory in a floral blouse. You know, she'd never actually hurt you. This is about attention, Kendra. It was always supposed to be her. And she caught herself and pivoted to how a court order would look to the church. What my mother did not know, monologuing about attention, was that a copy of that Cox South discharge summary was sitting in my lawyer's safe. She lectured me about Melissa's healing without knowing I knew what there was to heal from, that every righteous sentence was self-incriminating testimony delivered free of charge to the quietest audience of her life. I just said, "Okay, Mom," and "I have to go, Mom," and wrote it all down when she hung up. The family sorted itself that weekend like laundry. 2 great aunts and cousin Dana went cold, but Aunt Carol called and her voice had gravel in it. I was standing 3 feet away at that shower. Honey, I know what I saw and I know what I heard. And if a judge wants to hear it too, you give them my number. First witness volunteering. And then she added almost casually, the thing that told me the tide was turning under the family's feet. And Kendra, I've been thinking, nobody ever did see Melissa's belly, did they? Not once, just the sweater. Even the choir was starting to count. The order required Melissa to stay 500 feet from me, my home, and my workplace. 11 days after she was served, I opened my front door at 6 a.m. to leave for a day shift and nearly stepped on a white box. No postage, no note, ribbon tied in a careful bow. Inside, folded in tissue like something precious, were 2 newborn bodysuits, soft yellow, and across each tiny chest, embroidered by hand in rose-colored thread, a name. Harper on one, Hazel on the other. Names we had told no one but my mother. Names that existed on a stolen printout in my sister's handwriting. Now stitched. Stitched. Needle and floss. Hours of work under a good lamp. Onto clothing for my children, left on my doorstep by a woman legally barred from standing on it. I want you to sit with the hours. Rage is fast. A Facebook post takes a minute. Even the knife took only a second of madness. Embroidery is slow. Embroidery is patient. Somewhere across town, my sister had spent whole quiet evenings pulling my daughter's names through fabric. Letter by letter, loop by loop, planning what a gift, a claim. I stood on my porch in the July morning light with the box in my hands, and for the first time since February, I was purely, physically afraid. Then I did what I had trained myself to do instead of feeling things at 6 in the morning. I photographed the box on the porch where it lay. I bagged it in a 2-gallon Ziploc from my own kitchen. Evidence, style, tissue, and all. I called the non-emergency line, met the officer on my lunch break, and filed report number 1 for violation of an order of protection. The officer, a young guy with kind eyes, held up the bag and studied the stitching. "This is hand done," he said. "Somebody took real time with this." I said, "I know, that's why I called you." With a violation report filed and a hearing on the docket, June had the leverage she'd been building toward all spring. A subpoena for the portal system's access records. Not the clinic's front desk view, the network's actual audit logs, the ones nobody at a reception desk can see. It took the health network's legal department 3 weeks to comply. On a Tuesday in late July, June called me into her office, laid a printout on the desk, and turned it around to face me the way you'd turn a verdict. "The receptionist told you the truth," she said. "No one but you ever accessed your account. She just wasn't looking at the right account." 6 years ago, after my appendectomy, I'd signed a form giving my mother proxy access to my patient portal. 1 signature, 1 recovery, 1 ride to a follow-up appointment, forgotten by March of that year. The clinic I'd used back then had since been folded into the same network as Riverbend Women's Health. The proxy came along with it. Dormant, invisible in my settings, alive in theirs. Lorraine Whitmore, authorized representative, 31 logins in 8 months. June had matched them against my notebooks line by line, a login the morning of the funeral lilies, a login the day before the waiting room ambush, 20 minutes after Riverbend confirmed my rescheduled scan, a login the evening before the hospital started getting calls about Nurse Hensley's schedule. My mother hadn't let something slip at a kitchen table. My mother had been running surveillance on her pregnant daughter and delivering the take to the woman pointing the knife. 31 times, methodically, for months. And the canary sang that same week. A cousin's Facebook thread about hospital bills, and there was Melissa commenting from her account, mocking certain people who think they are too good for mercy and have to deliver at St. Vincent. St. Vincent, the false detail, the one I had spoken aloud to exactly 1 person once over pot roast with the door closed. The pipeline complete and documented. My chart to my mother's eyes, my mother's mouth to Melissa's hands to my doorstep. June clicked her pen and said the only celebratory thing I ever heard her say. "We have both of them. Now we get you safely through this delivery, and we wait for November 14th. Neither my mother nor my sister had any idea what we were holding. They kept right on talking. Harper and Hazel Hensley were born on a Thursday at the end of July at 37 weeks by scheduled C-section at Mercy General, where the plan had always been. Harper came first, furious about it, 5 pounds 1 ounce of opinion. Hazel followed a minute later at 4 pounds 14, calm as a Sunday, and the room laughed because you could already tell whose temperament came from whom. When the nurses laid them on my chest, both at once, skin to skin, one tiny ear against each collarbone, Travis put his forehead against mine and cried for the first time in the 10 years I'd known him. Big, silent, shoulder-shaking tears, his hand covering both of their backs at the same time like a tarp over seedlings. I'd spent 8 years working 3 floors above that delivery room. I thought I knew what happened in it. I knew nothing. Nobody tells you their weight gets measured in ounces, but their existence lands in tons. For one whole day, I forgot I had a sister. That is the honest truth, and I'm not sorry for it. For one day, there was no order of protection, no audit log, no cream sweater, no countdown to November. Just a bag of warm laundry asleep on my chest in duplicate, and a man snoring upright in a vinyl chair with one sock off and a paper cup of hospital ice chips that tasted, I swear to you, like champagne. Aunt Carol visited with 2 crocheted hats and didn't stay long and cried in the doorway on her way out. My mother sent flowers to the front desk. I had them redirected to the children's ward without reading the card. And I want you to know that it didn't even hurt. That's how full the room was. The world gives you days like that, so you'll have something worth defending. It was about to remind me why defending it mattered. Here's what nobody in my family knew about that delivery. I'd spent July preparing for it like a mission, because hospitals have security protocols for exactly my situation, and I'm a nurse. I knew every one of them by name. Our admission was flagged confidential. Call the switchboard and ask for Kendra Hensley, and the answer was that no such patient existed. The maternity ward runs on a coded door anyway. But our chart carried a security alert with a copy of the protective order attached. And the visitor list had 3 names on it: Travis, Carol, and my charge nurse friend Deb, bringing contraband milkshakes. Friday morning, the day after the girls were born, the unit secretary picked up an outside call. A woman, warm as pie, so sorry to bother. She was the patient's sister. A family had planned for a delivery at St. Vincent and switched last minute. And could someone just confirm the room number? She wanted to send balloons. The secretary, bless her trained heart, confirmed nothing, logged the call at 9:40 a.m., and reported it up because of the flag on my chart. St. Vincent, my canary, singing for the second time on a recorded line to a maternity desk. The false detail had traveled the whole pipeline again and walked right into a log with a timestamp on it. An hour later, hospital security escorted a woman out of the second-floor parking garage. She'd been standing between cars near the skywalk entrance. No visitor badge and left without argument when approached, so no report beyond a line. In the shift log, description: mid-30s, sunglasses, oversized cardigan. It was 94 degrees that day. I read that line in the security summary June requested, sitting safe behind a coded door with a daughter asleep on each arm, and I felt the strangest calm. Every door she tried, I had already locked. For once, being the one who plans for the worst was paying out in full. The knock came on a Tuesday in late October. The girls were 12 weeks old. I was 3 weeks back on day shifts, and the woman on my porch held up a laminated badge, MS, Fields Children's Division, following up on a report. Every parent's stomach knows that sentence before the brain translates it. Someone had called the state hotline about my daughters. The report, she explained inside, alleged that a night shift nurse was leaving newborn twins unattended, that the infants were failing to thrive and missing medical care, and that there were unsecured weapons in the home. Anonymous, of course. I want to tell you what fear tastes like when someone aims the government at your children, like a penny under your tongue. And then I want to tell you what 8 months of discipline does. I didn't argue and I didn't tremble. I charted. I walked MS. Fields through my home with the folder I keep on the girls. Every pediatric visit since birth, weight curves climbing like stock charts, vaccination records, the pediatrician's after-hours line. I showed her the nursery, the locked medication box, the fact that the only weapon in our house is Travis's gun safe. I explained, and then documented with the court paperwork, that I hadn't worked a night shift since the twins were born. Day shifts only, my schedule stapled to the fridge. MS Fields was kind, thorough, and done in 90 minutes. Case closed as unsubstantiated, she said, and paused at the door with her tablet against her hip. She couldn't reveal the reporter, she said, and then in the careful voice of a woman staying inside her lane while pointing at the lane over. But the report mentioned your night shifts and described this home's layout. Most anonymous reports don't come with a floor plan. The details in that report belonged to someone who had been inside my family's dinner conversations, or inside a stack of stolen mail. After her car pulled away, I stood in my hallway shaking with a fury I hadn't permitted myself all year, because this was new territory. The knife had been aimed at me. The post, the lilies, the ambush, me. This report was aimed at taking my children. And underneath the fury, cold and quiet, a question with only bad answers. If she couldn't get them on paper, what was she building instead? The first week of November, June and I did the full walkthrough for the hearing. Now 9 days out, her conference table looked like a small, well-organized war. 63 logged incidents across 2 notebooks, 2 police reports, the embroidered bodysuits in their Ziploc, the audit log with its 31 entries cross-referenced in June's tidy hand, the maternity desk call log 9:40 a.m. St. Vincent's, the CPS closure letter. Aunt Carol confirmed and subpoenaed, and Blake had called June himself in October and said he would testify to all of it. The discharge summary, the padded sweater, the outvoting. I owe your daughters that much, he told me on the phone, and his voice cracked on daughters. Into the middle of that week, my mother's letter arrived. 4 pages handwritten, her good stationery with the hummingbirds. I've read it many times since, always with the same amazement, because in 4 pages of ink about family and forgiveness and what Daddy would have wanted, there is not one sentence acknowledging that anything had ever been done to me. It was addressed to a problem, not a person. Drop this court nonsense, honey. Families don't need judges. Let me host a dinner, the 4 of us, and we will work this out where it belongs. And then the closer, underlined, the sentence I will hear in her voice until I'm old. We were going to fix this as a family. Were, past tense, as if the fixing had been scheduled all along and I had wrecked it by declining to hold still. I did not answer the letter. I added it to the war table where it became Exhibit L. On the 8th of November, 6 days before the hearing, my phone rang at 4 in the afternoon with a number I didn't know, and a voice I'd never heard said, Mrs. Hensley, Detective Moss, Springfield Police. Do you have a minute? It's about a storage unit out on Route 9. Detective Moss would say almost nothing on the phone. A facility called Store Safe. A unit whose contents appeared to concern me and my children. Could I come out in the morning and take a look and bring photo ID? And a pause I have thought about many times since. Maybe don't come alone. Travis's mother took the girls that night. I didn't sleep and I didn't try. I stood in the doorway of the nursery for a long time listening to the two of them breathe out of sync, Harper snuffling like a small engine. Hazel silent and serene, even asleep the calm one, and I ran the whole 9 months through my hands like rope. The knife in February, the lilies in March, the waiting room, the tears that shut off like a faucet, the sweater, the gate latch scraping at 1:40 in the morning, rose-colored thread, 31 logins, a floor plan and a hotline report. Every one of those things I had caught, logged, bagged, and countered. And on paper, I was winning. The order, the audit, the hearing, 6 days out. Standing in that doorway, none of it felt like winning. It felt like I'd spent 9 months documenting the weather of a hurricane from inside the house. And tomorrow morning, a detective was going to open the front door and show me the sky. 9 months of documentation, and I still wasn't ready for a door on rollers. Around 3 a.m., Travis came and stood behind me without a word, and we watched them sleep like people watch a fire. You know how babies breathe with their whole torso, ribs and belly and shoulders all in on the project. And finally, he said the only thing there was to say. Whatever's in that unit, Kendra, it ends this week, one way or the other, it ends. At 8:40 the next morning, we pulled into the gravel lot of Store Safe on Route 9, and Detective Moss was waiting by Unit 214 with the door already up. You already know what was in Unit 214 because I opened this story standing inside it. Now, let me tell you the rest of what my eyes found once my knees came back. The crib was assembled, a convertible double, the exact model from the baby registry I'd started online and never sent to a soul. Registries, it turns out, are searchable by name. The dresser drawers were organized by size, newborn to 6 months, tags on, girl colors on the left, and taped to the inside of the top drawer was a printed schedule. My schedule, my old shift rotations at Mercy General, my OB appointment dates going back to March, the girls' 2-month checkup, printed, highlighted, annotated in the margins in that looping hand. On the wall above the rocking chair, photographs, our house at night, the north window, the crib boxes on the porch the day they were delivered, Travis in the yard with a coffee, and the mail, a rubber-banded brick of it on the folding table. My bank statement, Carol's birthday card, $20 still in it, 2 appointment reminders from Riverbend. And at the bottom, tucked in a folder like homework, a typewritten draft, 3 pages, addressed to the children's division, alleging neglect by a night shift nurse with phrases I recognized because I'd heard MS. Fields read them off her tablet in my hallway. This was where the hotline report was written, in a rented room with clouds on the wall at a folding table next to a lamp shaped like a sheep. Moss's people had been called by the facility manager, a heavyset man named Gary, who kept apologizing to me like any of it was his fault. After-hours door alarms had flagged the unit twice that week, and Tuesday night he'd found a woman asleep inside it. In the rocking chair, wrapped in a baby blanket. Trespass after hours, welfare check, police. The officers saw the male, federal offense right there on the table. Ran the names painted on the wall. And Harper and Hazel, Hensley came back attached to an active order of protection with my name on it. My own paperwork had led them straight to me. One more thing, Moss said and flipped her notepad. Units not rented to Melissa Carr. Lease says Lorraine Whitmore. That your mother? Behind me quietly, Travis said a word I won't repeat. I looked at the clouds and the sheep and my daughter's names, and I said, yes, that's my mother. Moss walked me through the paperwork in the manager's office under a humming fluorescent light with a space heater ticking in the corner. Lease for Unit 214. Signed the 3rd of March. 2.5 weeks after the baby shower. $89 a month. 9 payments, auto pay, and the card on file belonged to Lorraine Whitmore. Gary, wretched with apology, remembered the rental day well. An older lady, very put together, said it was for her daughter. A nursery's worth of things. They're going through a hard time and need somewhere to keep it all until things settle. They'd come back together over the summer, more than once, unloading boxes. He remembered them laughing. My mother had signed that lease in the same 2 weeks. She was calling me about Melissa's fragility and poorly timed announcements. March to November. The entire time. Every Sunday dinner where she passed me green beans and asked how I was sleeping. The hummingbird letter about fixing this as a family. All of it happened while her name sat on a lease. $89 a month bought the room where my replacement was being furnished. And I have to be precise here because precision is all I had left. I don't believe my mother thought she was building a kidnapping. I believe she thought she was managing one. The way she'd managed the stomach aches, the funerals, the shower for a baby who was gone. Storage until things settle, as if a delusion were a sofa. As if when it all blew over, the crib could quietly come home to whichever daughter needed it by then. She hadn't lit the fire. She just rented it a room and kept it fed and made sure nobody ever called the fire department. While I signed the property sheets, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Mom, sent from a kitchen 15 minutes away with no idea where I was standing. Sunday dinner. I made your favorite. It's been too long, sweetheart. I looked at it for a long moment under the fluorescent hum, next to a detective cataloging my stolen mail. Then I thanked Gary, thanked Moss, walked to the truck through the gravel lot, sat in the passenger seat, and rode the whole 20 minutes home in silence with my mother's text glowing in my lap and 5 days left before the hearing. I never answered it. There was a courtroom for that now. November 14th came down gray and cold. The Greene County Courthouse hallway smelled like wet wool and floor wax. And my family had sorted itself onto benches like a wedding nobody wanted. Carol and Blake and Travis on one side, my mother's people on the other, Dana studying her phone, the great aunts in Sunday coats. My mother arrived early, of course, in her navy funeral suit and made straight for me before June could intercept. She took my hand in both of hers, pressed it, and whispered, urgent and warm like we were conspirators. "It's not too late to stop this, sweetheart. Walk in there and tell them it was a misunderstanding. We were going to fix this as a family." 5 days after a detective showed me her name on that lease, she said it to my face again. And I looked at her, really looked the way you'd read a chart, and I understood she wasn't lying. That was the terrible center of my mother. She believed it, every word. The same way she'd believed a party could cure a loss and storage could hold a delusion, and I could be spent like housekeeping money to keep her firstborn's weather calm. I took my hand back slowly, without heat, the way you take an instrument away from someone who shouldn't be holding it. And I said nothing at all, and her face changed as if I'd shouted. Then the far doors opened and Melissa came up the hallway with her lawyer and the benches went silent. One row after another like a wave dying on a beach. She was radiant, serene, and under her open coat, unmistakable, deliberate, was the soft, rounded front of a woman in her second trimester. The cream sweater. Nobody moved. Nobody asked. In a hallway full of people who had toasted her at a shower in February, not one person met her eyes, and every last one of us was counting. Courtroom 4 was small and warm with a ceiling fan that ticked on every rotation, and it held, by my count, 19 members and friends of the Whitmore family by the time the bailiff closed the doors. Judge Ann Hollies presided, a compact woman in her 60s, with the air of someone who has heard every version of every story and would like the short one, please. June rose and gave it to her, and the short version took 40 minutes because the short version was 9 months long. As she entered the notebooks, 63 incidents dated, witnessed, the photographs, footprints by the north, window, the lilies, the white box on the porch. The bodysuits came out of the ziploc, and June held them up by the shoulders, tiny and yellow, rose thread names catching the light, and asked the room to note they were hand-embroidered. And the ceiling fan ticked in a silence that had weight. Then the audit log. 31 accesses by an authorized proxy matched. June read them in pairs. Deadpan, devastating. Login, incident. Login, incident. Login, incident. Then the maternity desk log. 9:40 a.m. A caller citing St. Vincent. Then June's explanation, brief and surgical, of the canary. A false detail spoken once to one person at a Sunday dinner. And I watched Judge Hollies stop writing and look up first at my mother, then at Melissa, and lay her pen down flat. Carol testified to the knife in plain bus driver declaratives that no cross-examination could dent. She pointed it at the pregnant one. I was 3 feet away. I moved her arm myself. And then it was me. I'd worn my work shoes for steadiness. I answered June's questions in order, kept every answer short, and did not look at the benches. At the end, June asked what I wanted the court to understand, and I said the sentence I had practiced at the nursery door at 3 in the morning, the truest one I had. I'm not here to punish my sister, Your Honor. I'm here because my daughters can't testify for themselves. The fan ticked. Somewhere behind me, a great aunt was crying. I found out later it was one of the two who had unfriended me in February. I kept my hands folded and my voice level, and I stepped down. Calm is a language, too. I'd been fluent all my life. This was the first room that ever heard it. Melissa's lawyer opened by calling the whole matter a family misunderstanding, tragically inflamed by grief, and for a moment, the benches breathed easier. Then June called Blake Carr. Watching a decent man dismantle his own life under oath is not a thing I ever want to see again. He kept his eyes on the rail, and his voice at a mumble the judge twice asked him to raise, and he laid it all out. The emergency room in October, 17 weeks. The discharge summary, now entered as an exhibit. The plan in the parking lot at 2 in the morning. The shower that went forward in February anyway. The padding under the cream sweater. He had found it, he said, in the laundry and been told it was a posture pillow. The 4 earlier losses over 6 years, hidden one by one. His begging for a doctor, a counselor, anyone. And the answer that came back every time from his mother-in-law in her kitchen, calm as scripture. Therapy is for strangers. Family heals family. I should have gone over both their heads, he said finally to his hands. I kept telling myself, family knows best. I was outvoted. You can be outvoted right off a cliff. Then Detective Moss took the stand and put Unit 214 up on the courtroom screen, and I listened to 19 people inhale at once. The crib, the clouds, the names, the schedule taped in the drawer, the photographs of my house at night, the brick of mail, the drafted hotline report on the folding table, the lease 3rd of March, Lorraine Whitmore, $89 a month. State's charges pending, Moss noted, professionally colorless. Stalking, mail theft, violation of a protective order. Additional findings referred. Through all of it, I watched my sister at her table because I couldn't not. She sat perfectly composed, hands folded on the swell under the sweater, watching the screen show her nursery to the county, and her lips were moving barely. A whisper with a rhythm to it, the same shape over and over. And from the second row, I finally made it out, and my whole rib cage went cold. 17 weeks, 4 days. 17 weeks, 4 days. Not a defense, a rosary, somewhere under the performance, and the padding, and the rose-colored thread. My sister was still standing in a hospital hallway, in October, counting. For one breath, God help me, I grieved for her. Then the judge asked if she wished to testify, and Melissa stood and smiled. She was good for about 90 seconds. Composed, wounded, gracious. The coffee shop performance scaled for a courtroom. My sister accepting the role of a lifetime. She spoke of grief, of sisters growing apart, of hoping for healing. And then her lawyer asked the question he had to ask, the one that would humanize her. Was she aware the storage unit's contents referenced her nieces? And Melissa looked at the screen, still frozen, on the painted wall, on Harper and Hazel in careful looping letters, and something in her face came off its hinges. Referenced, she said quietly at first. That's their room. The lawyer tried to move on. She rose out of her chair instead, and her voice rose with her. And 30 years of practiced fragility burned off in front of the county like fog in the sun. They were supposed to be mine. She stole them. She watched me lose mine, and she went and took 2 because she takes everything. Her lawyer's hand on her arm. She threw it. Off, the bailiff moving, Judge Hollies's gavel. The benches frozen, and Melissa turned from the screen to me and pointed. No knife this time, just a shaking finger, the same trajectory, my body, my center. And she screamed the sentence she had been rehearsing since a February afternoon with a ribboned blade in her hand. This was my day. It was always supposed to be my day. The gavel again and again. Order in this court. She was still shouting as the bailiff walked her out to compose herself. About the shower, about the names, about what she was owed. And every word she landed drove another nail into her own case, sworn on the record in front of 19 witnesses who had known her since she was born. Her lawyer sat down slowly, the way men sit when the building has already come down. I did not move. I did not make a sound. My hands stayed folded on my lap, and I watched my sister be removed from a courtroom confessing at full volume, and I finally understood the whole shape of it. She had waited her entire life for a room full of family to look at, no one but her. And here at the end she got it, the last stage she will ever be given, and no one in the audience was clapping, and she couldn't tell the difference. Judge Hollies took 20 minutes in chambers and came back with a voice like a closing door. Full order of protection, 1 year renewable. No contact with me, Travis, or the minor children. No third-party contact. And I want counsel to explain to the respondent's family precisely what third party means. 500 feet. Surrender of any keys or codes. The pending criminal matters would proceed separately. Given the testimony, the court strongly encouraged counsel toward a resolution involving mandated psychiatric evaluation, and the court would be making a referral regardless. Then she squared the papers, took off her glasses, and looked at the second row, where my mother sat in her navy suit, and the courtroom held its breath. Mrs. Whitmore, you are not a respondent here today, and this court has no order for you. But this record has your name all through it. A proxy account, 31 accesses, and a lease. This family did not arrive here despite your help. It arrived here by way of it. The county attorney will draw their own conclusions, and so I suspect will your family. That was all. It was everything. In the hallway afterward, the sorting happened all over again in reverse. the great aunt stepping back from my mother physically. One small step and then another. The way you move back from a stove you've just learned is hot. Dana crossing the hall to me with her phone hanging forgotten in her hand and tears on her face, saying, "I'm sorry, Kenny," over and over. My mother stood alone by the courtroom doors in her navy suit, straightening her hummingbird scarf with small, precise tugs, and called out to the retreating backs of her own generation. I was keeping this family together. Nobody answered her. Nobody even slowed down. Carol put an arm through mine. Travis got the other side. And we walked out through the wet wool smell into the cold. And behind us, her voice bounced off the marble and came back to her alone. On the courthouse steps, the November wind came straight down the street with nothing to slow it. And Travis pulled my collar up with both hands like he was tucking in a kid. Across the lot, Blake sat in his car with the engine off, forehead on the wheel. Carol squeezed my arm and went to knock on his window because Carol is Carol. I stood a minute in the gray light, one hand on the cold stone railing, and looked back up at the doors of the building, where in the span of one long morning I had been believed. Fully, officially, on the record, for the first time in 32 years. 9 months, 63 incidents, 31 logins, 2 notebooks, 1 canary, 1 judge. The knife was never the scary part. I got in the truck and we drove home to our daughters. It's been 6 weeks since the hearing, and I'm recording this from a house you haven't seen in a city I won't name, 2 hours from Springfield. We put the little brick house on Maplewood up for sale the Monday after court. Ruth cried, then helped us pack, then gave the new owners a full briefing on the neighborhood, I'm told. And a hospital here had an opening on their pediatric floor that fit like it was tailored. We didn't run. We chose. There's a difference, and it took me all year to learn it. Running is when you leave to get away from someone. Choosing is when you leave to get towards someone. And the someones are asleep down the hall in a nursery we painted ourselves. No clouds, no names on the wall. They have a whole life for people to learn their names the ordinary way. The legal ledger. Since I promised you consequences you could count, Melissa signed a plea agreement in December. The stalking and violation charges, with the male count folded in. Conditioned on inpatient psychiatric treatment, which her attorney fought for and I did not oppose. Because a locked ward with doctors is the first honest room my sister has been given in 35 years. The evaluation named it a delusional disorder woven through complicated grief, 5 losses deep, untreated by design. Her sentence is treatment. Mine, I suppose, is knowing that if one person had said the word doctor in October instead of shower, none of us would know what a courtroom fan sounds like. Blake filed for divorce and moved to Tulsa near his brother. A card came from him last week. No return address. Inside, just a gas station card with a cardinal on it. Tell the girls someday that their Uncle Blake tried. I will. He gets to be in the story I tell them because he earned it at a diner table and again under oath. The nursery in Unit 214 was released from evidence in December. I had it donated, every stick of it, to a women's shelter downtown. Cribs are innocent. It's not their fault where they get assembled. Except the back wall, which Gary painted over himself before we ever asked. Gray primer, 2 coats, and my mother writes, to me, once a month the Hummingbird stationery, my new address courtesy of nobody I've identified yet. And honestly, it doesn't matter. I don't read them and I don't burn them. They go in a shoebox on the top shelf of the coat closet, sealed, dated in my handwriting, charted like everything else. Some doors you don't slam. You just stop standing in front of them. Here is the one thing I know now that I didn't know at that baby shower. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's a waiting room, and you will sit in it forever holding your paperwork until someone's sicker than you needs your chair. That's my story. One cake knife, 31 logins, two names painted on a wall that never should have known them. If this reminded you to check who still has access to your life, your accounts, your records, your peace, do it today, not Sunday. And share this with someone who keeps the family peace at her own expense.